Welcome, everybody. Today is the fifth lecture of ro3kvit, Urban Coalition for Ukraine. I am ro3kvit, and I have a few small practical introductions for you. First of all, please note that down in the Zoom window you have, there is this translating option between English and Ukrainian. Choose the language you will find the best. Julian will be speaking himself in Ukrainian, our speaker, and I will be speaking in English. And Olena is translating simultaneously right away. ro3kvit is a coalition for urban planning in Ukraine, urban planning and architecture. And we are a coalition of international and Ukrainian experts on this topic. And we are based in Ukraine, and I think now 60% of our people are Ukrainians. Ukrainian experts in the field of architecture, urban planning, energy, social development, economy, ecology, you can name it, all those things that are necessary for the rebuilding of Ukraine. We have every 2 weeks on Thursday evening, Ukrainian time, 7 o'clock, we have a meeting, a lecture actually about one of the topics that is really interesting us. And we invite 1, 2, 3 speakers to talk about one of those many things that needs to be debated. We don't have all the answers, but we do have a lot of ideas. We have at least the topics that we think should be put on the agenda. These lectures are being recorded, so also this one is recorded, and tomorrow or maybe the day after they will be also put on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, ro3kvit channel, and you can send it around to the people you think that need to see this also. Both languages are presented on YouTube. Today, I'm very honored to welcome Julian Chaplinskyy. He's an architect and has been in many different positions in Ukraine, both in architecture field as close to and inside politics. He's prepared a lecture about conflicts and challenges for urban planning and all those, let's say, do's and mainly also don'ts, probably what is being prepared in legal issues. So we are not at this moment looking for the architectural answers, but more about legal and governance questions that are at stake in Ukraine at this moment. He will talk about 35-40 minutes and present his ideas about the necessity for Ukraine. And after that, there is time for discussion, questions, debate. Please already put your questions that you have in the Q&A or in the chat, and then we can prepare the questions and I can moderate the second part, and we will finish that after probably 30 minutes more. That being said, I'd like to really give the word to Julian Chaplinskyy, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Fulko. Дуже дякую всім, хто нас дивиться.
Thank you, everyone who's watching us. I will try to speak in a slower way than usual due to the translation. So I would like to provide comfort for my interpreter today. So the topics that I would like to discuss today is very practical. And it's not about the pink glasses, but it's about restrictions and rules about that are existing in our country and that are being practiced at the moment. So the Parliament has already registered in the first reading the reform that is being supervised by the head of the Sluga Narodu, Servant of the People party, the leading party. And this reform concerns architecture and urban planning. While observing the activities of this team and party, I have an impression which later grew into conviction that the treatment of architecture and urban planning by this party is rather weird and disrespectful. And the bills that are being adopted now, that are planned for the adoption too, are lobbying the interests of big developers. And they are to be implemented during the post-war reconstruction. So, today I'm talking about the things which few people know about. It is about the general scheme of planning of Ukraine. And we have, as I said, this master plan on the level of the country. So it outlines the major planning decisions for the development and use of the territory of Ukraine. And this document is one approved by the law, and it was developed by the Ukrainian State Research Institute Dipromist, and it was adopted on the February 7th of 2022, and yet no one is thinking of revising this scheme, though so many years have already passed. The Deputy Minister of Minister of Regions is directly involved in applying this general scheme, and the ministry should fund its revision. And here you can see all the chapters that are included into this general scheme. And here you can see the English titles. So it's about the ecological restrictions, the transportation system, about the engineering system. And I was just curious, does it have anything about tourism? Because the tourism should be dealt with on the more local level, and they need to know what exactly natural resources they have. And yet this is included into the scheme at the level of the country. So it is rather weird, the scale of it. And let us now have a look at the way it is.
В цифрі, в растрі, щоб ви не дивували, відповідно, немає.
This is a scheme that is lacking the figures. And when I have read everything, I actually was in the dark because it is very graphic, but it doesn't give accurate information, because it deals with phrases like high potential, low potential, etc., urbanized territories, the zones of natural landscapes, etc. But what does it mean for Ukraine? I actually say that yes, it does. It is important for Ukraine. It is strategical for Ukraine, but it is absolutely unclear and vague. And when I was looking also through the statistical data of 2002, I saw that Ukraine has 7 airports, 8, I apologize for my mistake. And because Odessa didn't have its airport running, but somehow, if you look at the information provided, it has everything together. I mean, it's both airports and information about tourist resources and about types of natural resources, etc. So actually, it looks absolutely insane. And in the planning schemes, there were, it was not just weird and vague, it's just that it was also not familiar for people. So both at the national level and at the local level, this is the photo of our mayor, of the mayor of Lviv, and who was running for president actually. And one of the slogans of his campaign was to provide air connections for the country, to develop airports, and he got attracted around 2.5 million tourists to Lviv, and these tourists would bring money, and you can see the multiplications on the left and the result of it on the right. So $616 million annually was brought by tourists to Lviv. And so he was showing in his electoral campaign video these diagrams about transportation, about airports, and he showed that Ukraine needs to develop air flight industry, and it will develop the country. Another point which can be discussed when discussing this general development scheme is that the new Minister of Infrastructure, who was working in 2018, Amelian, declared that he wanted to develop the Hyperloop in Ukraine, which was initiated by Elon Musk. So he was trying to get the hype and get on top of the moment. But practically, the next year, the new Minister for Infrastructure said that there will be no Hyperloop in Ukraine because it is science fiction. So I think that these ministers didn't see the general plan for Ukraine at all. And another interesting project that is connected to the scheme, which is not presented on this general scheme of Ukraine, but which is really interesting, and it is an international, it was to be an international project promoted by the Deputy Minister of Belarus and the Ukrainian authorities. It was the renovation of the waterway, the ancient waterway from the Varyags to the Greeks, and it was to connect the Black Sea and the Baltic Sea, and the big part of this waterway was to be in Ukraine. Then it had to go through Belarus, and I was surprised that the representative of the state authorities agreed to list part of our main river, the Dnipro, as the international waterway. actually, it turned out that this project was opposed massively by large groups of people, and these included protesters both from Belarus and from Ukraine, because Desna, the river Desna in Belarus is a flooding river, and it would be actually killing the unique ecosystem to build this modern waterway through the Desna river in Belarus. And so this was an insane idea and ecologically very dangerous. Also, there were various ideas about the potential revival and development of Ukraine, and there was a plan to turn Ukraine into some railway hub, and you can see here the routes that would go through Kazakhstan to China to Turkey, and so they were to be railway routes, and so Ukraine would have to develop a lot of railway nodes, terminuses, and transitory stations, and so these railroads would bring goods from China, and so Ukraine was to turn into a railway hub. We can understand this is an impossibility in a contemporary world, but actually this idea which was discussed still is unfamiliar to the authorities, and it's not represented on the scheme. And in 2022, there was an article published in a Transcarpathian paper that in Uzhgorod, the regional capital of the Transcarpathia, the local deputies with the mayor took the position against the development, the strategic development of the Uzhgorod airport, and through corruption, they have transferred the lands belonging to the airport into private hands. And so strategically, it was quite a shock to learn about. And so this runway was to turn into a kind of street, and it would be like a very long street. And the deputies decided that, oh, Uzhgorod doesn't need an airport. And so, yet, it should have been an airport that united all the Transcarpathian cities. This year, the state-owned airport representatives filed a complaint to court, and the representatives had a conversation with our Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, and Shmyhal, after agreeing the issue with the Prime Minister of Slovakia, said that the airport has the green light and will be continued. And so the conclusion is that the general planning scheme of Ukraine, the master plan of Ukraine, has statistical nature, and this statistics is outdated because it dates back 20 years, and it is not feasible to actually tweak it, to update it. And in my opinion, the master plan of Ukraine must be simplified, optimized only for projects which are state-owned, nuclear power plants, intercity transports and engineering connections, customs crossings, landfills, land airports, etc. So these are the projects that must be regulated, and so because if you have a look at the existing plan, the very scheme, it looks ludicrous. And the second thing I believe must be done here is synchronization with annually, on the annual basis, with the state budget, because budget is new every year. The presidents change, and every parliament, all the deputies each time introduce new projects, like this waterway through the Dnieper and the Mr. Rivers. And I guess that the deputies must correlate their projects with budget. The budget should state how much funds can be invested into the implementation of the general strategy of development of Ukraine, etc. The third thing, which I guess should be there, is providing a mechanism for informing on all ministries and the parliament about the document and synchronizing their work, so that the Minister of Transportation could express his opinion about this strategy and inform other ministries of the possibilities, for instance, and opportunities. Further, I believe that local municipalities should bear criminal responsibility for violating the strategic plans of the state. They must know that they are criminally liable, and they must actually sign underneath and know what and how they must do to implement the strategic plans of the state. So who cannot get state-owned land, for instance, leased to them? I think I have already mentioned it. The materials of the GPSU general plan, strategic plan of Ukraine, should be of strategic nature, not statistical. And the last one, all projects provided for by this plan must be submitted by relevant ministries after economic justification, feasibility study. So the Minister of Transportation must discuss his own part of the plan, introduce it, discuss, adopt, and then share with the rest. If a natural preserve is to be created, it also must be discussed in the relevant structure by the relevant institution and then shared by the rest. Because now they are not even looking through these documents. Now we're getting to another level. This is the master plan of a city, the general plan of a city. And it is a very important document. For many years, they were presented as a plan because our economy was plan focused, and this was reflected by the master plan because the land was owned by the state, the resources were owned by the state, and the structures, of course, were state-owned. The residences, places of residence were state-owned, etc. So practically, each city was a big development project ruled by the state. And it has changed recently, and now the rules are not there, and the plans which I have seen were renovated, revised in 2002. And I would like to say that here you can see in yellow the areas which are deemed to be best for settlement and development. This is the transportation scheme. Why I took it? Because transportation is always an issue, but here you can see a typical approach, scaled, and the final option is to get the circular road around the city. There is one interesting thing here. I don't know whether you can see it clearly or not. So here there is a thoroughfare going through the whole city to unite the north and the south. And to do this, it needs bridges that should be built above the existing historical buildings. And so this thing in red in the center of the scheme is the downtown area, and to build the transportation structure above it would cost billions of dollars. And when I asked why do we need it, I was told that, well, because there is not, it is not there. And then I asked again that to do this, you will have some area which cannot be used for residents, which should be changed in terms of function, etc. And what about the red lines, etc.? And imagine a big truck entering Lviv and then leaving Lviv in 20 minutes on the other end. To do this, you will be too costly if you need to build the whole infrastructure to ensure this 20-minute passage for a truck through Lviv. So another thing is that when I was studying the master plans, I understood that there are a lot of personal things there. There is a modernistic approach, which included dividing everything, separating functions, and designing very functional cities. And I was talking to such architects everywhere, in Poltava, in Kiev, in Vinnytsia, and they all are for the expansion of the city. Meaning,
Julian, we lost connection. Julian.
Yes.
Yes, this is better, but we see you. Yes, now without. Yeah, now I think it's normal again. We heard you until the other cities, they were all thinking about expansion.
Once more, other cities. Now is okay?
Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
Отже, я зрозумів, що переважна більшість генпланістів.
So I understood that most master planners think in terms of expanding, occupying suburbs. And you can have a look at the simplified scheme. And so the modernists who I talked to would have the historic downtown, then they will have industrial belt, and then after this industrial belt, Soviet time industrial belt, they would build huge dormitory districts, residential areas for the workers. But this industry collapsed, this industrial belt collapsed, apart from the railway business, of course. And so this area was divided. The industrialized zone was divided. It was appropriated. And in European cities, when the processes of revitalization of the industrial zones take place, municipality centralizes these efforts. But not here. You can see that this violet-colored zone was all divided, and it's a compact area. It's you can reach everything there like within half an hour on foot, or 15 minutes by public transportation. And we started discussing things, arguing that let us make Lviv a walkable city, let us not expand it too much. And so we started to discuss the integrated concept of its development, and we saw that it is the existing concept is at odds with the wishes of the community, because yes, transportation experts from Berlin helped to do the transportation system, infrastructure, etc. But when we saw the solutions for public transportation, we saw a lot of automobile highways, and it is again this is the major idea. To keep the reform would be to emphasize the public transportation. And when we actually overlapped our ideas on the existing schemes of the railways and of the proposed transportation solutions, you see this quite a neat intersection of all sorts of transportation thoroughfares. And we have pinpointed the nodular nodes in this scheme where you can concentrate the transportation and which would allow easy access of the city center. And the city must work on these nodes, transportation nodes, and actually these nodes are the investment spots to be developed by the city. And this is the framework plan of the integrated concept of the development of Lviv. And many experts took part in developing it, but it was though it was adopted by the Deputy Council of Lviv, it didn't go much further because Lviv legislation does not promote such integrated strategic development. And so it's difficult to legalize such a comprehensive concept, and it can be adopted by the parliament, but doesn't go much further. So the conclusions will be that actually there are more conclusions why the master plan of a city cannot be implemented, but here are the major ones. So we need enough tools to work with land plots, because to work with development you need to have its own land, but the city loses its land because the communal land is what is left of the streets, of the interhouse passages, etc. And it is quite difficult also to get the land to build a new tram line or to build a new road. So it's quite difficult. So we need the tools, legal tools, to work with land plots. The second thing is functional designations of the lands are too blurred. So because the industrial zones, as you have seen on the scheme, was just colored violet, and it didn't matter what kind of industry it was, whether it was light industry, whether it was service industry, whether it was heavy industry. And all the plans that I have seen are automobile focused, and practically the proportions of the streets and the avenues remain the same from Soviet times, and it is truly dangerous and difficult to cross such thoroughfares. The next thing is number 4, inflexibility, because the plan can be changed only once in 5 years. So meaning that it is adopted for 5 years. But we have, our world is changing. We had the COVID pandemic. We had so many changes in the world happening within 5 years. We never thought that the war would erupt. We actually already forgot COVID because it was wiped out from with a more horrible plight. So in terms of urban planning, 5 years is a big period. Reason number 5, there are no connections with economic or political strategies, and there are no horizontal connections of the strategical plan, because it is done by research institutes, and they fail to ensure participation in its design process. And so such strategical plans are actually fantasies of specific experts. It is good that we have public hearings. It is good that we have ecological expertise, but we discuss the documents when they are already drafted. And so actually, when it is drafted already, very few changes are desirable. And so the institute of profound, there are no institutions that are doing profound research before drafting such strategies, but they should be there. And in terms of, for instance, these transportation infrastructure, multi-layered ones, it would be excellent to have it, for instance, 1 layer underground, 1 layer above the ground, but this is absolutely costly and unrealistic. and it will never be implemented. And the red lines that are there are a huge constraint and restriction to such fantasies. And the general plan of the city should avoid being what it used to be, but rather should be a plan of, let's say, general constraints, restrictions. And it must include things that must never be changed. For instance, a river cannot be developed, you cannot build upon a river. So it should also list where we have the historical heritage, where we have the green framework, where we have transportation. And these restrictions for development of the land should be set for, let's say, 50 years more, so you can never develop such areas. Another thing is that, for instance, an important moment here is the transportation infrastructure, public transportation infrastructure, which must be there, which must be developed, and which must take into account the growing population, because as soon as it doesn't, there is no opportunity to change anything. Another thing is, my second proposal is that the functional land zoning should be flexible. So you shouldn't set the functions rigidly. The functions of the land must be flexible. Yes, there should be some general structure, inflexible structure, but around it, the land zoning must be flexible. Also, the general plan of a city must take into account the general plan of the general development of Ukraine. It must comply with it. And if, let's say, the city wants to build a road, it must take into account the general plan of the development of Ukraine and vice versa. And it must not program the population and its life, because life must adjust to itself all the economic challenges, the architectural challenges, etc. And so the life of the population should dictate architecture, not vice versa. Another thing is that the general plan of the city master plan cannot have an exhaustive special model, because there is no document which can list each and every aspect. It cannot be exhaustive. When the population center is small, yes, it is possible, but still unnecessary. So I believe that this document should not give answers to all possible land use questions. If there are some difficulties, some difficult challenging areas in the city, you can actually you can paint them white, make them blank, and put off till later. The current master plan, dating back to 2010, shows some very attractive green territories. And when I was assigned to the position of the chief architect of Lviv, we saw this, and we saw that there are green areas in the northern suburbs of Lviv, and yet the master plan included the possibility of making the circular road through these green areas. And we said, let's abandon this idea, because if this road, circular road, goes through the green zones, it ruins all the green parts. And our concepts are just our intentions, and if we change, we change, and then hell ran loose, and they started developing these territories.
І от подивіться,
And
ви бачите,
on top, you can see the fragment of the development of the northern suburban area, which used to be cottages, holiday homes, dachas, but here you can see, here are the lands used for mixed development, and in the middle, the pink zone shows some multifunctional development. And according to the law of Ukraine, the owners of those holiday homes had under the law opportunity to unite as come together as one joint cooperative and privatize their land, and privatize those land previously used for kitchen gardens. And actually, these are hectares of land that were allotted to private persons, and so to enable this development, these developers, prospective developers, actually drew fraudulent schemes to forge documents, etc., to privatize them and to buy them out for large-scale development. And there were like dozens of such cooperatives. And you can see on my bottom right scheme that here these cooperatives, former cooperatives, turned into these yellow zones, and they were bought out, and they were ready to be developed by multi-story developers. Of course, the urban project Department of Architecture tries to influence the situation, tries to find space for public spaces, for kindergartens, for roads, etc. But the result of their efforts is this. Again, this is the zoning, and you can see that the central part of the area in pink on my previous schemes is already being developed by developers building multi-storied buildings. And it is a very attractive piece of suburbia, a suburb not too far from Lviv, and the owners of the land that was not sold out tried to appeal the decision of the Department of Architecture, which gave these developers the free hand, but they failed. And so, yet, this situation gave the restrictions. But there is now the restrictions for the development in this area. But there is one thing that must be clarified here. The law says that both the zoning and the detailed planning must be detailization, elaboration of the master plan. And at the time, there is also the law that the permit for the development can be supplied only on the basis of the zoning existing at the local level, not on the master plan existing at a higher level. And so here you can see that this master plan shows different spots, multicolored spots, but these are changes in zoning, aren't they? But somehow other people say, no, these are not changes in zoning, these are adjustments, elaboration on the existing zoning. So we have here like zones G4, G5, G3, here shown in pink on the upper picture. And the developers say, well, this is elaboration of the existing zoning. So nothing is changed in terms of zoning. And speaking so of the composition here, you can see that there are like neatly placed high-rise developments already on this plan. And they are trying to, again, fantasize about the possibility that will never happen, that will never be become an opportunity. So it's all about the change of the land use. Once again, as soon as it becomes possible, yes, but here, all this thoroughfare that you can see so neatly presented on this left-hand scheme is not there. It is just a fantasy. And so when this dense development started to get denser and denser, people who got already settled in these houses, they started to get out, and the cottages, the holiday homes were started to go away. And so we tried to interfere to actually save the composition, but it turned out that the agencies that had to control the quality of architecture were doing nothing, were not interested at all in the landscaping, in the landscape gardening, in providing transportation infrastructure. They are not even concerned with the number of layers of the development. And it was horrible time when from 2015 till 2022, the chief architectural inspection ruled this country and its cities. And you can see here how it started on the top left photo. It was quite innocent. It started quite innocently, but now this development became denser and denser. And it's all about nobody following the rules. Here you can see the plan. The houses had to be of this kind of density. It had to have 6-8 layers. This was the silhouette. And next to it, these two houses I'm showing should have 7-8 layers, but not 10 stories, which was the end of the story. And so it turned out that the plans actually that were drafted were used to really change the land use of the plot, but This is the situation in 2013. In the previous photo here, it is the 2020 situation. So this is the issue of urbanism. And still, no one cares about the streets. No one cares about the space between the newly built houses.
Julian, can I interrupt shortly? We are now at minute number 50, and could you wrap it up or speed it up a little bit to have time for questions also?
Окей. Отже, недоліком цього зонінгу є...
So, the challenge of this zoning is the acceptable typologies. And the acceptable typologies mean that you can develop any plot with any number of layers. And the only restriction is it still should be residential function. And so you can see the growing population. And this was the initial plan. And the norms that are there and the typologies that were initially planned cannot accommodate the number of people that actually were users. And the construction started. So in my opinion, the zoning plan must include permissible typologies. It must have a 3D spatial model. And cities have to have the right to make their own restrictions for development. If the city wants this kind of silhouette to be preserved, then it has the right for it. Unfortunately, we don't have this. And of course, zoning must be participatory. And ideally, it must align with the strategy, the national strategy. Here is the video I would like to show. This is the site of the developer, showing how these new objects are constructed. So you can see there are no thoroughfares, there are no streets. They are placed contrary to the general plan, master plan of the city. And so the agencies that accept this are exist on the city level. Further, very briefly, speaking about this area in the north, which I have described to you, the Urban Development Office proposed such a variant, but this is their concept from 2014. This is the concept. If you wish, I can switch on the music. So, these are the streets which are not there. These are the streets which were planned but never constructed. And actually, these were the streets to form the micro-districts and to connect them like that. And in 2014, the master plan of the city included this concept. And the tallest buildings had to be 9 layers. The dominant tall building had to be 20 layers. And so this is the story. And just have a look at the red lines between the houses. Have a look at these horrible proportions. So this was proposed to us. So the conclusion is the detailed plans do not work because sometimes the building plans are just absurd, but besides, building typologies sometimes do not follow the set restrictions, constraints. And so all those volumes of urban planning documentation had to give rise to restrictions, to development constraints, but they haven't. And so, as I said, the plans should be a collection of constraints about the about everything, about the typologies, the streets, but also landscaping, landscape gardening, etc. Instead, we have fewer restrictions, just 13 points, and practically they look like a questionnaire. You can have a look, like they start with the name of the construction object, name of the owner, name of the developer, etc. Here, yes, this document contains certain requirements towards landscaping, towards traffic infrastructure, towards historical heritage. They used to be there, but in 2021, our authorities decided that 13 points were too many, and they have eliminated 4 points. You can see here the major restrictions include the name of the construction object, the number of layers, and permissible percentages, etc. And now the question is, we have no influence on the developers who decide what to build, what form to build, what facade to have. When he wants to increase the density, the developer will increase the density. And it could be apartments for rents. And if he needs to increase still the density, he can turn the technical stories into some residential things. And so all the development that is done recently is of high density. And so the streets that emerge are horrible. Have a look at the red lines. And so have a look where the parkings are. This was Lviv, this is Chernivtsi, and here you can see this is mass product. In Stuttgart, there was a street, the legendary one, but still you can see that the city insisted upon certain restrictions, and so this shows in the profile of the street. And another tragedy is the absent passport of the facade. In Kiev, when the Podol's theater was built 15 years ago, as soon as the developer changed and as soon as the architect changed, you see the architecture changed too. But the passport of the facade didn't have to be agreed. And yet the public was really outraged by it, and they had their say. And once again, not a single form of construction documentation, not a single one works in Ukraine, and So there is a minimum of 2-3 restrictions which will be followed by the developer. The rest is just ignored. Thank you very much for your attention. I would be very happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Julian Chaplinskyy, for this introduction, this lecture, and your vision on urban planning on 3 different levels, maybe even 4, from general state master plan to city to zoning plan to detailed plans. I start with a question myself, and I see already some questions coming in, and they're not translated for me, but I got them already in my screen, but I will ask those later. First, my first question is, you have those 4 different layers from the states and then smaller and smaller. What is your experience in Ukraine with the relation between those different scales? And I asked this question because 2 weeks ago, Oleg Drozdov and me, and also Alisa Alexandrova, we were from the ro3kvit team around different cities in Ukraine. We were driving around and having talks with people from the municipality and heads of architects and deputy mayors. And many questions that they were having were about the relation between these different skills and the position of their own municipality, their own city, their own village within the surroundings. And I also see your different skills, but I was wondering, do you have an advice how these skills should be connected and how villages or cities should collaborate, work together with their neighbors?
Ми мали, я зібрав вже був всі підписи.
I have already collected all the bills issued by the relevant authorities about the documentation, about the urban planning documentation, and so they must be collected and they must be made known to the relevant parties, and they must be discussed at the level of the city mayors. They need to discuss engineering infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, so that the planners who are doing this documentation, drafting the documents, will have the idea about the opinion of the city authorities and the city public. So participatory approach. And there shouldn't be just selling off the land to some kind of developer who's going to build whatever he wants there. And actually, yes, I agree. This is a problem of the whole country, from north to south. The central authorities want to concentrate everything in its own hands, and so there are these state-run institutions which are providing solutions, and their solutions are sold as European approach, but this is regulation, this is centralization, not decentralization. But my hope is that during the times of woe, local authorities gain more strength. They have their own horizons. They are not going to blindly follow the instructions from above. Of course, there are political resources to stop certain atrocities, sometimes at the level of the developer, sometimes at the at the level of the city, when sometimes just by looking for interesting, effective legislation, but not everyone now understands that Ukraine doesn't need avenues 100 meters wide. And so politically, we have few political specialists, and we have few expert urban planners who could work efficiently. And so I understand that I hope that after the war, we will have a new generation of urban planners who can do better.
So that means you now answered the last question that Andrei has been addressing. Do we have a resource of specialists in Ukraine that can deal with these integrated community plans? You say maybe not yet.
Definitely not. Однозначно не маємо кількості спеціалістів.
No, unfortunately, there are very few specialists of the new generation in Ukraine, and we do need them drastically, urgently, and the task is to engage people in documenting and bringing them together to simply ask questions. And so education really is the key here.
Thank you. I will put in some, I will mix a few of those questions that have been asked in the Q&A. And I start with Alexander Anisimov, because he asks, for example, is it possible to create a dynamic online land use system? So very practical, yeah. So you have a lot of issues that we are addressing, that you are addressing to. But does it make sense to have something like an online land use system? And the second question you also asked is, who should? I changed the question a little bit, but who should own this land use system, or not owning? Who should direct it? And what is the role of the public control, and what is the role of the urban planning city council? So is it maybe also a question of who does what in this?
Ну, на жаль, у нас люди усвідомлюють, що землю вкрали.
Unfortunately, our people understand the situation as the land was stolen from them, and the communities understand that their land was stolen, and it happened during like several years, very recently. So the mayors, the deputies are engaged in this process, and so there are a lot of scandals, and yet it is very difficult to find the guilty parties. And we understand that there are many trials now underway, and yet they are not satisfactory. And like 10 years ago, there was a fraudulent case, and actually it was not even the case for the court. It never reached it. So I cannot say that the situation is just tragic everywhere. Privatization is really important, and I was one of the persons who created the register of land plots for the region, for the city of Lviv. But it is necessary to change the land ownership, yes, but I believe that the most important thing is to get people aware that they have the land, and the city has the public land, which it is not going to give to illegally to illegal parties. So yes, the topic of land is a difficult one, and we keep falling into the same pitfalls, and yet I can see that, right, the authorities are not managing very well here.
Okay, thank you. Connecting to this, online system, the development of the GIS, of the state level of urban planning cadastre. You're probably familiar with this, the technical task for this. Is it a good or real important development? Do you think so? It's a question by Danilo.
Fulko, I apologize, but you have to repeat question because something was with sound.
Something with the sound. The first question in the Q&A is by Danilo, and I think it's related to this online topic. He says, thanks for the talk. Are you familiar with the technical task for the development of the GIS of the state level urban planning cadastre? So what is your opinion about this development? Is it real or not? Is it a good development or not?
Я не дуже глибоко в темі, знаю.
I am not a specialist in this topic. I know that yes, there were some funds allotted to create it, but this is a very slow. It was a very slow and very inefficient process, and it turned out that around 20% of Ukrainian fields were listed as land of different they changed their land use purpose. So I'm not very knowledgeable in the topic, so cannot speak in much detail.
Then I'm gonna take a question from Natalia Bafovska. She says, why did you not mark such a type of urban planning documentation in the comprehensive plan for the spatial development of the territory in the territorial community? Natalia Bafovska, she is also in the Q&A.
Да, є таке. Я тут не згадав про так званий комплексний план просторового розвитку.
Really, I have not here touched upon the topic, and I did it on purpose because community is a different unit, but actually the situation is the same. It is once again the change of land functions as one of the major challenges, and it's again about the story about the streets, about the transportation infrastructure, about the profiles, about the typologies. So the amalgamated communities are communities of several settlements, population centers united, but as soon as this community gets a big city that amalgamates other minor towns, then it comes to the next level, and then the community general plan is actually the master plan of a city and or a master plan of a region, and this is not exactly the right thing to have.
Thank you. There's totally other topic and a very interesting question by Oksana. There is a shortage of building materials in Ukraine. It's coming. It's maybe even a shortage of building materials in Europe. Do you think this fact will have a significant impact on the planning structure of cities during the reconstruction, or will it just limit this period?
Building materials?
Yes, the shortage of building materials. Oksana wants to connect your vision to what is happening in the war and the shortage of materials in Ukraine. Do you have an opinion on this?
No,
Actually, I can say that obviously all our cities in Ukraine are a combination, a mixture of the master plan dating back to the end of the 19th century and this romantic modernist approach of the Soviet times, which created the problems for the cities. That is the mismatch between these two systems, and this is the key to all our problems. There are many cities in which this modernist development is ruined, and so I think that this gives us also an opportunity to restructure and to, as for the construction materials, I don't think that this is of crucial importance, but rather I would focus on the planning aspects which outline the development of the cities. The building materials are a minor thing in the process.
Thank you. Clear answer. New question by Alexander Anisimov, and this is interesting. How to channel these ideas that you have, or maybe more ideas amongst the people of ro3kvit and the people who are now watching. How do we channel these ideas to the ministry? How do we make a process? How do we design a process of new spatial planning policy? And how can we step out of this moment of, let's say, complaining about, this is my words, complaining about what is wrong, but at least bringing in how to do it properly?
Я, на жаль, не вірю.
Unfortunately, I do not believe, and I'm absolutely not ready to become a minister and to act on a ministerial level. I guess that our ministry now doesn't do the work, rather they are engaged in scheme making, in planning, and this is imaginary. And so I guess that we must work through NGOs, we must influence young politicians, young opinion makers, who will just enter and start the political career, and then they will be ready to act. Because at present, we have no communication channel with the ministry.
Okay, and that's not a very fortunate answer. I think quite a lot of the open questions have been mentioned in between the lines of your answers. I do think the comment of Kirill, which is not really a question, but it also comes with this, what you just said, because he said it's not only the urban planners and the engineers that we need, involve the other experts, involve local people, the community, but also involve psychologists, sociologists, and other specialists in Ukraine, but also worldwide, and that will that really connects to your NGO option, or at least have a public debate. And I think also for me, Kirill, thank you so much for this help, because this also explains how ro3kvit tries to work, and how ro3kvit tries to use the knowledge of local architects, but also use the knowledge of anthropologists, cultural developers, managers, sociologists, research in history, etc., because it's not a single topic, and everybody has his own quality, everybody has his own legislation, everybody has his own history, and we need to integrate it in all those layers that we've seen in many of the urban planning maps. They're actually much more complicated even. Julian, I'd like to thank you for your introduction, because in the beginning you also mentioned those topics which are now in the general master plan, but this list is actually endless. And the most interesting part of this list is how to connect it vertically. and to really integrate all those qualities of a place and also all those difficulties of those places, and then find the right answer. And hopefully we can find this in urban planning in the future of Ukraine. I'd like to give you the last words, Julian, because it's almost done. And maybe if you want to emphasize on something, and then we are going to wrap up and finish for today.
Thank you very much, Fulko. Я хочу додати насправді на завершення.
Thank you. So actually, not everything is bad. We can see many improvements. There are many young architects who understand how to work responsibly within a city, and I believe that Ukraine will use its wish to enter the European Union, to become a member state, to change its legislation, because ministers do change, and there are very specific demands about sustainability, and this can kickstart the process of Ukraine's moving towards more positive development.
Thank you so much, Elena. Thank you so much, Julian. Thank you so much, Valentina, for the technical support. I'm finishing this meeting and this lecture, and very much hope to see you in the future very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Elena. Thanks, Valentina. Bye. Bye.